Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to the National Parks Expedition Challenge. Today we're at the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail in Montgomery, Alabama. We're here with a few guests, and our first one is Ranger Tegan. Ranger Tegan, thank you for having us here today.
Thank you so much for being here today.
So Ranger Tegan, you've started here at the national parks, but you have a history before that. What other national parks have you been in?
Yes, before this, I worked in Kentucky at Mammoth Cave National Park, and then before that in South Dakota at Wind Cave National Park, and before that at Assateague Island National Seashore in Maryland, which is where I'm from.
And now you're here, which we're so glad. What is your duties here?
I'm a park ranger position here on the trail, and I also take care of all of our social media, as well as help out the front desk, answer questions, meet with groups, and really anything else that might need doing.
So you have many hats that you wear today.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce our other guests for today. So can you do that?
Perfect. We're also here with Mrs. Mary Boone. She's the wife of Reverend Richard Boone, a very important figure on the trail as well as a teacher, and she's done a lot of work here in Montgomery, continuing the work of her late husband.
Well, Miss Boone, we are so glad that you're here with us today in this very iconic spot. We already have a kindred spirit because we're both teachers, and my dad was a pastor and your husband was a pastor, so there we have some things again. But before we get started talking about this place, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name, as you know, is Mrs. Boone. Every third grade child knows my name at Dozier and other schools. I teach all subjects, and therefore we have so much fun, not only with the subjects, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also with STEM. And so that has been my life. Not only that, but I wanted people to know all about my husband. He's been such a great citizen of Alabama and the world. And so even when I talk to the students, I talk to them about just being a good citizen. And so that's what my husband and I always try to do. And I continue to work in this community, serving and having events. We plan events so that our community can come together in different facets.
That is wonderful. And so you also wear many hats, just like Ranger Tegan.
Oh, yes.
Well, we're going to get back to talking about Reverend Boone in just a few minutes, but thank you so much for allowing us to be here today and using up your time. So thank you for that.
Our pleasure.
Great. So Ranger Tegan, can you tell us a little bit about this park, when it was founded, and a little bit about why it's here?
Yeah, so the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail was established in 1996 by Congress, and that would have been 31 years after the original Selma to Montgomery March, after those events. And eventually, it wouldn't have been until about 10 years later that the first visitor center was built here along the trail, so starting in Lowndes County, just kind of halfway between Selma and Montgomery. And then we now have 3 visitor centers along the trail, one in Selma, that Lowndes one, and then our brand new visitor center here in Montgomery, our Montgomery Interpretive Center.
So tell us about why this place is important in history.
So here in Alabama, this is kind of the cradle of the voting rights movement in a big way. That march, that Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, eventually led to, several months after those events, led to the passing of the Voting Rights Act, which got rid of a lot of different obstacles that Black folks here in Alabama, across the United States, faced that prevented them from being able to exercise that constitutional right to vote. And there was, of course, history, decades leading up to this moment, but oftentimes what people are the most aware of, kind of what comes to mind first when they think of the Selma to Montgomery March, is the events in Selma on Bloody Sunday on March 7th, 1965, when 600 peaceful protesters, majority Black, began to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma and were met with they said, a sea of blue. So it would have been with John Lewis and Hosea Williams at the front of the 600. They were met with the sea of blue of police, of state troopers, of posse men, local people kind of activated to prevent them from continuing that voting rights march. And they were attacked. They were attacked with tear gas, with clubs, from horseback, with dogs, and fled back to where they'd begun that march that day, back to Brown Chapel A&E in Selma. And those events, that horror, was documented. And it premiered on news that night, and the nation was able to see what was happening here in Alabama, what was happening to prevent people from being able to not only vote, but also just to protest that they couldn't vote here in Alabama.
So can you tell us a little bit more of the story as far as who else was involved in this walk?
Yes, of course. So on Bloody Sunday, there would have been kind of all walks of people, from little kids, 8, 10, 12 years old, as well as grandparents there, and especially in Selma, the kids, students, teenagers, elementary school students were a big part of how that movement was able to continue. Because in Selma, if you were an adult, you're a parent taking care of your family, it was a big danger for a parent to protest, to show up at the courthouse to ask for your right to vote, because there's a lot that could be done to you, right? You could be fired from your job, you'd be evicted from where you were living, and if that happened, how are you able to take care of your family?
Right.
Now, of course, I'm not saying it was safe for kids to protest, but there was less that they had to worry. Not safe, just less dangerous, right? So for years leading up to that moment, that Bloody Sunday moment, students left school sometimes several days in a row, sometimes monthly, weekly, to gather together to hold sit-ins, to hold protests, to gather at the courthouse to demand the right to vote for their parents, because of course they were kids, they couldn't do so. And that being said, oftentimes while they were there with that knowledge of the importance of what they were doing, sometimes they were also just there because they got to get out of school, for an afternoon. Sometimes they were there because their friends were going and their friends brought them along. Sometimes they were going because they were just a teenage boy and their crush was there. And then as they continued on with that movement, they learned, right, that this wasn't just about, getting out of school, but it was about this bigger picture of the difference that they were able to make within their community and without knowing at that time that they were able to make within the world as well.
So I can imagine when this was broadcast and people saw this, that there was outrage around the country. Did that bring in people from outside of Selma, outside of Alabama to walk?
Yes, exactly. So as the nation saw this travesty, this horror being enacted upon peaceful protesters, people flocked from not just across the country, but also across the world. And it was about 2 days later that Dr. King put out a kind of call to clergy people as well to come to Selma to respond to what is being done here. And within just a few days, within just less than 48 hours, thousands, tens of thousands had come to Selma, to Montgomery as well, to continue on that work that began more publicly on Bloody Sunday.
So the thought of the journey began years before the actual day, but then the journey continued, and from Selma came to Montgomery. Miss Boone, one of the things that I'm fascinated by that I don't hear a lot or read a lot in the history books is all the movement that was happening here in preparation for the people coming from Selma. So tell us about that and how your husband is one of the integral parts of this.
Well, I'll let you know that on Bloody Sunday, Richard was there. And so the SCLC, the leaders there said, now we have to prepare to go now that the court system said, yeah, we can march. So we need you to go to Montgomery, where you're from. And we need you to prepare students and anyone else who's interested. And you have the connection with St. Jude already. You have connections with the sisters there. And so you go there and you prepare. So that's how he was involved. He was logistics behind the scenes. And so he was at Alabama State at some point as well. So he knew all about Alabama State. At some point, he was suspended, of course, went back, but he was able to influence so many people who were like him and love the fact that now we can talk about freedom and rights to vote and then maybe other rights that we might have. So that was his point, to come back here, organize, and he came with hundreds and hundreds of students and some adults, but mostly students.
So we're standing at a place where he gathered those students.
Absolutely.
So tell us about that.
Well, he marched from Alabama State to Loveless, then over to St. Jude. I'm told the sisters told the students, what are you waiting on? Get up and go follow him. And that's what they did. So we had all of these people deciding that this was right, the right thing to do, and so many conscientious students and young people and a few old people too. And they came to this point and they sang and they prayed, and people from the greater Washington Park community looked out. Some of them joined. The people from over here at Mobile Heights. And so we needed these people because as our marchers were coming in, they needed places to stay, they needed food to eat. And this spot, we call it the sacred area, this spot right here, all of this is where they met and marched on to St. Jude.
I love that. And I love that he was there preparing the way for the ones that were coming. He was empowering students. And I also read that he wasn't pushing them to come. He was sharing what was happening and giving them invitation if they wanted to join, to be good humans, to celebrate this idea now that there could be some more marching towards equality, and he wanted to bring these people together. Now, there's a marker behind you, and I know that your heart is all about honoring your husband and the work that he did, because it's not finished yet.
Absolutely.
So tell us about what you had to do to get this marker up.
Dr. Drizzle, it's very important to let students know you might start with a little idea. But when you have passion in your heart, you'll have all of your friends around you. And so that's what I had to do. I was there, and then I took a word from Richard. He had passed on. And he said to me, just go. Just do what you feel is right. And I started that way. And at first, people were energetic. And they said, yeah, we're going to come. But when that day came, I didn't see many. So sometimes, Dr. Drizzle, that will disappoint you. But if you continue and you say, well, I'm going to just do this on my own. There are little things you can do on your own. You might see paper down on the ground. There are really small things. And then if it's something in your heart, I felt like I needed to honor my husband, and I would do that on my own. But it just so happened when I went to Selma and someone announced Mrs. Boone is going to walk, I had people coming to me, I'll walk with you. And I was looking up, Richard, you're right. Just one person have an idea. And if you have it right there and you're passionate about it, then people will understand. I mean, Richard Boone, he was so passionate about citizenship. And he loved the fact that you could gather people together. And when they heard the news that we could do something to change our lives, then they would follow. And I felt that same way. So yes, I marched for 5 days, reenacting that first march, the second march, I'm sorry. It would have been the third march. And we reenacted that with a few friends. And we came all the way in 5 days. And when we got down to the memorial near the Capitol, Representative Thad McClammy had a heart and a passion for this area as well. And so he brought the proclamation from the governor at the time. The next year, we had another governor. They felt the same passion. And we were able to get our representative, Senator David Burkett said, we're going to put a marker there. We want to remember this place. Now, Representative McClammy and the United Methodist Church put the signs up, but all of that started with passion.
Mm-hmm.
One person saying, I think I need to do this, and then going to your friends, boys and girls, Dr. Drizzle, just going to your friends and saying, this is what we can do in school. This is what we can do to change our scores or to learn a little more. That one passion spread around.
You're putting me at a loss of words right now, because we talk about when your passion intersects your purpose,
Yes.
you should live in the intersection of that.
Yes.
And that's what you've done. But I think it would be interesting to our students to know that you weren't with Reverend Boone at the moment he walked the bridge. So when did you meet him and become Mrs. Boone?
Oh, well, I met him for the first time. I saw him like everyone else, and I said, oh my goodness, look at all the young people. But I'm going to tell you, just as Ranger Tegan said, a lot of parents were very afraid. And they would push that fear and say, oh, Mary, don't do this. And so I stood on the sideline with many of my friends. And as we saw those marchers coming in, some joined them, and some of us said, no, we better do what our parents said. And we stood on the sideline. And so as I grew older, that stuck in my head forever and ever. And because they came through, it changed all of our lives. And all of the young women, ladies, girls who stood there, I could just go down the row and say, oh, she became a public worker. She became a school teacher. I became a school teacher. You know, all of us were influenced by just being good citizens. So even though we didn't march, we were influenced by it. Now, later on, when I did meet him, it was after he had gone to jail, believe it or not, for the last time. It was his last time going, and he needed people to help with some other programs. And as soon as he got out of jail for the last time, we were picketing for welfare rights. So I was one of those who did that, and that's how I came to know him. The way I met him, he needed someone to transcribe all of his dissertation on toilet paper that was written on toilet paper while he was in jail, because they would not give him a paper, okay? So it was written there, and I was transcribing, and then I started going to the different meetings and learning how to organize, and all of a sudden we became the greatest of friends, and from there, husband and wife.
I love that team that came together
Yes.
to change the world, each with their own strengths, but together as a larger powerhouse. How long were you married, Miss Boone?
We were married 40 years. And I always say the third trimester was the best, because he left me here for the purpose of telling the story I believe. And so he knew that I would keep this going, not only tell the story, but live in a way that all citizens would be proud to join in and say, let's do something wonderful for the beloved community. So after that jail, after he went to jail, then from there he went back into the service, went to the Army. He came out as a major. But during that time, we were able to travel to California and Germany and many, many places where we were able to tell the story not only of Montgomery, but tell the story of our lives and how we love the beloved community and things you can do to become a part of it.
Well, wow. Ranger Tegan, what a cheerleader you have here for the national parks and specifically this place. What are the dreams of this place? What do you want people to know about this sacred place, as Miss Boone suggested that this was?
Definitely. Yes, we're so blessed, so privileged to have Mrs. Boone here with us, working alongside us. There's a lot of dreams. There's a lot of dreams for us here. And I think something to keep track of, something for us all to remember, is this story is not over, right? This history is not that long ago, as we are literally seeing right now. We're here with someone, Miss Mary Boone, that was present for the events we're talking about. There's many folks here in Selma, Montgomery, in Lowndes County, here in Alabama, that this is their history, right? They are still continuing to tell their experiences. This is not so long ago, as well as across the country. You know, there are people, many grandparents, your parents, that remember the events of this time period and are remembering what that means to us to continue on that work, right? To continue on.
So telling the story, continuing to tell the story seems to be a passion of this park. Well, kids, that reminds me of our task today. Our challenge for you is going to be based on the UN Sustainability Global Goal number 16, which is obviously social justice, and how we as humans can be better humans, can be good humans, or as Mrs. Boone said, good citizens. So we're going to ask you to help us participate in a community mural. Now, a mural is where you add lots of thoughts and ideas and pictures and drawings to one collective piece, which I believe is exactly how we can describe where we are now. So we want you to begin the walk wherever you are on this journey to being a good human. So we're going to ask that you research the Selma to Montgomery walk, that you research the park, learn more about Reverend Boone, and then we want you to design a piece of art that can be added to this collective mural that's going to be in, what visitor center are we?
Our Lowndes Interpretive Center.
Lowndes Interpretive Center. So we're going to ask you to think about words like peace and love and joy and mankind and kindness, and how can you incorporate that into a piece that tells this story and then encourages all of us to continue the walk, the journey, putting ourselves in the footsteps of who was here in the beginning and then how we're going to continue that walk. So once you create all of these designs, we're going to share those with Ranger Tegan in the park here. You're going to see all the hashtags running across the bottom of the screen. But please don't forget hashtag #NatParkChallenge, because we want these to go out wide and far. Now, here's the other thing. Once you have created your design for this place, how can you use that same design and incorporate that into a mural in your own community? You see, kids, we all have stories. We all come from places, and some of those are from places of hurt and despair. How can we, as the new generation of good humans, bring our thoughts and our passion and our love and our kindness together to change the world? I see you over here, Miss Boone, with your hands folded and you're so expressive. How excited are you that kids around the country are going to be part of this historic place?
Dr. Drizzle, I tell you, I am too excited. And being a third grade teacher, I love expressions, especially with the mural. Murals teach you so much. So kids everywhere, Dr. Drizzle has given you the challenge, and I challenge you as well. And we know you're going to do a great job. You're going to tell your stories, and they are going to go far and wide. Thank you so much.
I just have to hug for a minute. We're not through yet, but I just had to hug. That was a moment there. Ranger Tegan, a lot of our kids watching this want to someday wear that hat. Or the brown hat.
Flat hat, yes.
Can you look in the camera right here and just give them a few pieces of advice on how they can work now to possibly become a ranger later?
Definitely, yeah. I think something to remember first off is that a lot of us don't always know what we want to end up being or figure it out along the way. So it's okay if you figure it out later, if you're figuring it out now, if you figure it out after you figured out something else. It's okay. But for me, a lot of my path ended up with caring about nature, caring about my surrounding landscape environment. And if I'm honest with you all, when I was a kid, I didn't really care that much about history. It did not resonate with me. And it wasn't until I heard the stories of people's own history, right? So that's one thing to always be thinking of, hearing about their history, your parents, grandparents' history, as well as to continue visiting national parks or learning about national parks. I'd say any opportunity going forward to volunteer with your national parks, help us out, do a roadside cleanup, that can help, and continue whatever your passion is. That is useful. That is important. That is valuable. There is a park that talks to it. I guarantee you that.
I love that. And your journey's different because you're not in the National Park Service, but you are called to a purpose through education. So, can you give our kids just a few words of wisdom about how to be a good human?
I love the beloved community that you belong to, and we want your identity known. So, all you have to do is stand up, sit up, and do what is necessary in your heart. Start with your student, your friend right next to you, and whatever you talk about that's positive, do that with your friends and look around in your school. There is so much to do. I know people talk about bullying all the time, but give a smile. Do something for someone who may be so surprised that you would come up to them and say, let's get this done together. You can do this.
Thank you, kids, so much for joining us today. Be a good human, be kind, show love, have joy in your heart, and be that light in the world that we all need. So, on behalf of Mrs. Boone, Ranger Tegan from the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail, and Dr. Drizzle, we are out of here. Have a great day.
Bye.